what does crypto medicine look like relative to fiat medicine, to make the same analogy, right? The existing medical system, it assumes that a quick death is bad, an early death is bad, but also that living forever is either unrealistic or impossible or undesirable, that you should die with dignity or something like that, okay? So a little death is good.
Mm-hmm.
That's the existing medical system. Whereas the concept of life extension and, David Sinclair and, what you call it health span rejects that fundamental premise. And it says, actually, the way to defeat cancer is to defeat aging. Aging is actually a programmed biological process. And we have results that are showing stopping or even reversing aging in some ways. And so now, just like with the other thing, you say a quick death is bad, and so is actually death itself, right? So we actually want significant life extension. This is similar. It's very similar to what the rejection of the fiat system, right? The fiat system says a little inflation is good. Fiat medicine says a little death is good. Bitcoin says actually no inflation, just get more valuable over time. And crypto medicine says, actually, let's, extend life. This leads to all kinds of new things where you start actually thinking about, all right, how do I maintain my health with, diagnostics? How do I, take control of my own health with the decentralization of medicine? All the stuff that I've been describing sort of fits, like longevity is traditional medicine as crypto is to traditional currency.
If we take those assumptions separately, so we take cryptocurrency aside,
mm-hmm.
Is that to you obvious that this letting go of this assumption about death, is that an obvious thing? Is longevity obviously good versus, for example, the devil's advocate to that would be what we want is to keep death and maximize the quality of life up until the end.
Well,
so that you ride into the sunset. Healthy.
Somebody who was listening to the whole podcast would say, well, Balaji, just a few hours ago, you were saying this gerontocracy runs the US and they're all old and they don't get it, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And now you're talking about making people live forever, so there's never any new blood to wash them out. Haha, what a contradiction, right?
It's funny that you're so on point across all the topics we covered and the possible criticism. I love it.
Well, just trying to anticipate, some
good.
Right?
Well done.
So,
well done, sir.
I think the argument on that is, so long as you have a frontier,
mm-hmm.
It is okay for someone to live long, okay? So long as people can exit to a new thing, number one. Number two is, in order for us to go and, colonize other planets and so on, if you do want to get to Mars, if you want to become, Star Trek and, what have you, probably going to need to have, just to survive a long flight, so to speak, multiple light year flight, you're going to need to have life extension. So to become a pioneering, interstellar kind of thing. I know that's it's the kind of thing which sounds like, okay, yeah, and when we're on the moon, we're going to need shovels. It sounds like piling a fantasy on top of a fantasy in that sense, but it's also something where if you're talking about the vector of our civilization, where are we going? Well, I actually do think it's either anarcho-primitivism or optimalism / transhumanism. Either we are shutting down civilization, it's degrowth, it's Unabomber, etc., or it's the stars and escaping the prime number maze.
It's like, to me, it's obvious that we're going to, if we're to survive, expand out into space.
Yes.
And it's obvious that once we do, we'll look back at anyone, which is currently most people, that didn't think of this future, didn't anticipate this future, work towards this future as Luddites, like as people who totally didn't get it. It will become obvious. Right now it's impossible, and then it will become obvious. So
yes.
It seems like, yes, longevity in some form. I mean, there could be a lot of arguments of the different forms longevity could take, but in some form, longevity is almost a prerequisite for the expansion out into the cosmos.
That's right.
Expansion of longevity.
There's also like a way to bring it back to Earth to an extent, which is how were societies used to be judged. You may remember people used to talk about life expectancy as a big thing, right?
Yeah.
Life expectancy is actually a very, very, very good metric. Why? It's a ratio scale variable. There's like 4 different class of variables statisticians talk about. Ratio scale is like years or meters or kilograms. Okay. Then you have interval scale, where plus and minus means something, but there's no absolute zero. Then you have ordinal, where there's only ranks and plus and minus don't mean anything. And then you have categorical, like the Yankees and the Braves are categorical variables. They're just different, but all you have is the comparator operator, whether you have a quality, you don't have a rank. Okay. So ratio scale data is the best because you can compare it across space and time. If you have a skeleton that is like, 2 meters tall, that's from 3,000 years ago, you can compare the height of people from many, many years ago, different cultures and times, right? Whereas their currency is much harder to value. That's not like a ratio scale variable. Other things are harder to value across space and time, right? So life expectancy is good because as a ratio scale variable, with a very clear definition, right? Like when someone born and died, those are actually relatively clear. But most other things aren't like that. That's why murder or death, it can be scored. It's unambiguous. It's done when it's done. Whereas when did somebody get sick? Oh, well, they were kind of sick, or they were sick today. They were sick at this hour. The boundary conditions, many other kinds of things are not like clear cut like that, right?
And I should just briefly comment that life expectancy does have this quirk, a dark quirk that it, when you just crudely look at it, incorporates child mortality or mortality
Yes.
at age of 1 or age of 5, and maybe it's better and clearer to look at mortality after 5 or whatever, and that's still, those metrics still hold in interesting ways and measure the progress of human civilization in interesting ways. Yeah,
that's right. You actually want longevity biomarkers. A lot of people are working on this. There's this book called The Picture of Dorian Gray, right? And the concept is sell your soul to, ensure that the picture rather than he will age and fade, right? And so the concept is that that thing on the wall just reflects his age and you can see it, okay? So there's a premise that's embedded in a lot of Western culture that to gain something you must lose. If you're Icarus and you try to fly, then you will, you'll fly too high and it'll melt your wings. But guess what? We fly every day, commercial airflight, right? So the opposite of like the Icarus or Picture of Dorian Gray kind of thing is the movie Limitless, which I love because it's so Nietzschean and so unusual relative to the dystopian, sci-fi movies where there's without giving, I mean, the movie's kind of old now, but there's a drug in it that's a nootropic that boosts, your cognitive abilities, and it's got side effects. But at the end, he engineers out the side effects. Amazing. Just like, there are planes that crash and we land, right? Okay. So why did I mention the Picture during Gray? Well, there's another aspect of it, which is longevity biomarker. The point is to kind of estimate how many years of life you have left by, that Q.bio or Integrome, or you take all these analyses on somebody, right? One of the best longevity biomarkers could be just your face, right? You image the face and you can sort of tell, oh, somebody looks like they've aged. Oh, someone looks younger, et cetera, et cetera. And this is actually data that you've got on millions and millions of people where you could probably start having AI predict, okay, what is somebody's life expectancy given their current face and other kinds of things, right? Because you have their name, they have your birth date, you have their, date they passed away if they've already passed away, right? And you have photos of them through their life, right? So just imaging might give a reasonably good longevity biomarker, but then you can supplement that with a lot of other variables. And now you can start benchmarking every treatment by its change in how much time you have left. If that treatment, that intervention boosts your estimated life expectancy by 5 years, you can see that in the data. You can get feedback on whether your longevity is being boosted or not. Okay. And so what this does, it just fundamentally changes the assumptions in the system. Now, with that said, life extension may be the kind of thing, I'm not sure if it'll work for our generation. We may be too late. It may work for the next generation.
Wouldn't that make you sad?
Well, I've got something.
If you're the last generation.
Could be, but I've got something for you, which is, I call it genomic reincarnation. Okay, this one you probably haven't heard before. I've tweeted about it, okay? So,
by the way, good time to mention that your Twitter is one of the greatest Twitters of all time, so people should follow you.
Well, Lex Fridman has one of the greatest podcasts of all time. You guys should listen to the Lex Fridman podcast, which you may be doing, right?
Which you may be doing right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. So,
what was the term again? Sorry, genomic.
so I call it genomic, not resurrection, but genomic reincarnation. Okay. So here's the concept. You may be aware that you can synthesize strands of DNA. Okay. There's sequencing of DNA, which is reading it, and synthesizing DNA, which is like creating strands of DNA. What's interesting is you can actually also do that at the full chromosome level for bacterial chromosomes. Remember that thing I was saying earlier about the minimum life form, that Craig Venter made? So people have synthesized like entire bacterial chromosomes, and they work. Like they can literally essentially print out a living organism. All right. Now, when you go from bacteria to eukaryotes, which are the kingdom of life that we're part of, right? Yeast are part of this kingdom and so on. It becomes harder because the chromosomes are more complicated. But folks are working on eukaryotic chromosome synthesis. And if you spot me that sci-fi assumption that eventually we'll be able to take your genome sequence, and just like we can synthesize a bacterial chromosome, we can synthesize not just one eukaryotic chromosome, but your entire complement of chromosomes in the lab, right? Because you have, 23. 46, whatever, you take the pairs. What you can do is potentially print somebody out from disk, reincarnate them. Insofar, if your sequence determines you, and you can argue with this because there's epigenetics and other stuff, okay? But let's just say at a first order, your DNA sequence is Lex. You can sequence that, okay? You can do full genome sequencing and log that to a file. Then, here's the karma part. Your crypto community, where you've built up enough karma among them, if when you die, your karma balance is high enough, they will spend the money to reincarnate the next Lex, who can then watch everything that happened in your past life, and you can tell them something. Everything I described there, I mean, if you spot me eukaryotic chromosome synthesis, that's the only part that, I think will be possible, right? Folks are working on it. I'm sure someone will mess.
But it's essentially a clone.
It's like a clone, right? But it is you in a different time.
You're in a different time, but you don't, unfortunately, have the memories.
Well, you could probably watch the digest of your life, and it would be pretty interesting, right? I mean,
yeah, that's actually a process for psychology to study. If you create a blank mind, what would you need to show that mind to align it very well with the experiences, with the fundamental experiences that define the original version, such that the resulting clone would have similar behavior patterns, worldviews, perspectives, feelings, all those kinds of things.
Potentially, right?
Including, sadly enough, traumas and all that.
Or what have you, right? But basically, just like in a very simple version of it, by the time one is age 20 or 30 or something in your 20s, you'll sort of learn your own personal operating system. You'll be like, oh, alcohol really doesn't agree with me, or something like that. You just, by trial and error, things that are idiosyncratic to your own physiology. You're like, oh, I'm totally wrecked if I get 7 hours of sleep versus 9 hours, or whatever it is, right? People will have different kinds of, things like this. That manual can be given to your next self, so that you can know, don't do this, do this, don't do this, do this, right? To some extent, personal genomics already gives you some of this, where you're like, oh, I'm a caffeine or a slow metabolizer. Oh, that explains X or Y, or I have a weird version of alcohol, dehydrogenase. Oh, okay, that explains, my alcohol tolerance. So, this is part of the broader category of what I call practical miracles, right? So it's longevity, it's genomic reincarnation, it is restoring sight, and it is curing deafness with, the artificial eyes and artificial ears. It is the super soldier serum. Did I show you that? So like myostatin null. I tweet about this. Basically, X-Men are real. So here is a study from NEJM from several years ago. Okay. When is this? It was like the mid-2000s. This was in 2004. Okay. So it's now 17 years later. This is almost certainly a teenager by now. So this kid basically was just totally built
Yeah.
Okay. Extraordinarily muscular.
Like very muscular at a very young age.
Yes. So the child's birth weight was in the 75th percentile. He appeared extraordinarily muscular with protruding muscles in his thighs. Motor and mental development has been normal. Now at 4.5 years of age, he continues to have increased muscle bulk and strength. And so essentially, myostatin mutation associated with gross muscle hypertrophy in a child. So this is like real life X-Men. Okay. And
Yeah. And there's pictures of animals.
yes. So there's a company called Variant Bio that is looking at people who have exceptional health related traits. And it is looking for essentially this kind of thing, but maybe more disease or whatever related, right? For example, people who have natural immunity to COVID, understanding how that works. Perhaps we can give other people artificial immunity to COVID, right? If you scroll up, you see my kind of tweet, super soldier serum is real, where it's like wild type mouse and a myostatin null. And look at the chest on that thing. You see the before and after.
Wow.
Okay. This is what's possible. This could be us, but you regulating. Right? The saying like this could be us, but you play. This could be us, but the FDA regulating, right? All this. Okay.
Oh yeah, on steroids.
But it's not. That's the thing is,
it's not steroids.
Well, that's the thing is, people again, you go back to the Icarus thing. They think, oh, steroids. Well, that's definitely going to give you cancer, screw up your hormones, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And it could, but you know what? Like, have we actually put in that much effort into figuring out like the right way of doing testosterone supplementation or the right way of doing this? Obviously, we managed to put a lot of effort into marijuana, increasing the potency of it or what have you. Could we put the effort into these kinds of drugs, right? Or these kinds of compounds? Maybe. I think that would actually be a really good thing. The thing about this is I feel this is just a massively underexplored area. Rather than people drinking caffeine all the time, that's like a very mild enhancing drug, okay? Nicotine is also arguably kind of like that. Some people have it even without the cigarettes, right? Why can't we research this stuff? One way of thinking about it is, Lance Armstrong, the cyclist. Yes, he violated all the rules. He shouldn't have won the Tour de France or anything like that. But his chemists, and I say this somewhat tongue in cheek, but also, his chemists are candidates for like the Nobel Prize in chemistry because they brought a man back from like testicular cancer to like winning Tour de France's against a bunch of guys who probably, a bunch of them were also juiced or whatever, right? Whatever was done there, take it out of the competition framework. There's a lot of testicular cancer patients or cancer patients, period, who would want some of that.
And we should take that seriously. We should take that pursuit really, really, really seriously.
Yes, except, again, just like the Theranos stuff, all this is pathologized. Oh, it's a Balco scandal. Oh, it's this. Oh my God, And yes, of course, within the context of that game, they're cheating. In the context of life, you want to be cheating death.
Yes.
Right? So it's just a kind of a reframe on what is good, right? And it is just taking away these assumptions that mild inflation is good or mild death is good and going towards transcendence. So that gets me done with the giant FDA, biomedical, et cetera, et cetera.
Longevity, yeah. Okay. That's beautifully, beautifully done.